Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 260 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be reviewing a band that formed sometime around 2019 and also released an album, but have a pretty rough kind of history that sort of prevented the band from going on tour like they were supposed to and whatnot, which I will go a little more in depth on for this video. But their frontman was the indie singer-songwriter David Berman, who you probably know as being one of the co-frontmen of Silver Jews, of the indie rock band Silver Jews, alongside Stephen Malkmus. But his latest project is known as Purple Mountains, and it contains members of Woods, along with Kyle Forrester, Anna St. Louis, and a few others. So I'm here to review their first and only record that was released, and it's self-titled. This was released on July 12th, 2019. To widespread critical acclaim, and this is the album cover. What I think is really cool about this album cover is how each and every picture on it, including the one on the back, sort of creates a picture for each and every track on here. And there's the back. There's 10 songs on this thing, and it's 44 minutes, and released on Drag City, which has been David Berman's longtime record label for a while. A label based out of Chicago. And here's the little insert. It's got the lyrics, and you can see all the musicians down there. And this was produced by the two main members of Woods, who are Jarvis Tavernier and Jeremy Earl, who I believe may be the frontman of Woods or something. Thank yous. And it even shows like tabs for all the songs on here, so you could probably learn how to play them yourself. Here's side A. And then there's side B. No bells and whistles or anything like that. Just the vinyl. And that's vinyl packaging for the self-titled debut album from Purple Mountains. Now, I said this group has kind of a little bit of a rough backstory that I'd like to mention here. And this is going to get pretty sad, so buckle up, people. About a month after this album was released, it was announced by Drag City that David Berman had died at the age of 52, and that was on August 7th, 2019. Though no cause of death was announced. As NPR said, the New York Times reported that he had hung himself in his Brooklyn apartment. So you could, say he pretty much took his own life. And it definitely only adds a new sense of just like emotional unrest to this album, because this is definitely one of David Berman's saddest and definitely his most suicidal project to date. And that's saying something, given that this is actually his comeback record, coming 10 years after the final Silver Jews record. So, that left people wondering, if he was gonna, chill out for a while. He was, as Anthony Fantano said in his review, I guess he was, kind of needed to take a little break and find more things to be depressed about. but he also did actually collaborate with the Avalanches a little bit. Appeared on the final track off their comeback album, Wildflower, in 2016. Um, 16. And believe it or not, that was kind of how I first heard his name, was on that Avalanches album, Wildflower. Yeah, even if I didn't particularly love like his spoken monologue he provided on there, as I do consider that track to be one of the weaker cuts off of Wildflower. I did eventually, a few years later, find out about his very unfortunate and sudden death. And that actually was what got me curious to check out some of his music. And I heard all this critical acclaim surrounding Purple Mountains, and I decided to check it out. And I'm definitely very glad I did. This is definitely one of my favorite indie folk records of 2019. Definitely one that's grown on me with every listen. Even if it is a pretty emotionally draining album, especially in the context of him being gone. This album really does show what Berman always did so well, which was really being honest about his feelings and really making you sort of care for him a little bit. For example, on the opening track, That's Just the Way I Feel, which opens in your face with literally how he feels. Uncensored, warts and all. Well, I don't like talking to myself, but someone's gotta say it, hell. Things have not been going well. This time I think I finally fucked myself. You see, the life I live is sickening. I spent a decade playing chicken with oblivion. Day to day I'm neck and neck to giving in. I'm the same old wreck I've always been. Basically summarizing how his decade has been going since the last Silver Jews record, and doing it so in such a clever, kind of wry way. There's also some other pretty funny lines like, I nearly lost my genitalia to an anthill in Des Moines. I was so far gone in Fargo. South Dakota got annoyed. That's the shit I'm talking about when I talk to you about ceaseless feasts of Schadenfreude. Yeah, even if his words aren't particularly funny, they definitely have a real kind of sense of humor. They're just so snarky, in my opinion. And they go so well over the jaunty pianos, the heartbreaking trumpets, and the twangy guitars. Definitely got a little bit of that honky-tonk alternative country sort of vibe, which Woods definitely have been swimming around in that sort of sound for a while now. The next track on here, All My Happiness Is Gone, was one of the teaser tracks for this thing, and pretty decent track. I do love the instrumental quite a bit. I will say where the song falters, however, is that its lyrics are a little too on the nose with how he's feeling. I mean, I get it. His happiness is gone. He is barely hanging on. But I wish there were more lines just as clever as the line about 10,000 afternoons ago, all my happiness just overflowed. That was life at first. There was life at first and goal to go. The next track on here, Darkness and Cold, definitely is one of my favorite tracks on here. And he seems to be delving into kind of a relationship subject matter. Sort of talking about how the light of his life is going out tonight with someone she just met. She kept it burning longer than I had right to expect. The light of my life is going out tonight without a flicker of regret. So he sort of feels very much left out by other people, and it's definitely something that, even though it may make some people feel kind of bad about decisions they've made for themselves, it also kind of makes them be like, I wish I could tell you everything is going to be okay. Okay. Uh, okay, and I think this song very much, you could very much attach that kind of feeling to this song. Uh, Also love the instrumentation on here. The harmonicas cry so beautifully. The guitar sounds so beautiful. It's kind of semi psychedelic folk rock. Rock done in its best, and also love the vocal harmonies they incorporate into the mix. It's really one of the best tracks on the album. But then after that is probably the biggest letdown of the whole record, which is the song Snow is Falling in Manhattan. I mean, these lyrics have little to actually no kind of emotional impact, which is pretty disappointing considering how just depressing and harrowing the rest of the album is. And I know it's kind of crazy that I would take that as a compliment, but seriously, like, David Berman is better than this, better than this song for sure. And I also don't really care for the reverb on the instrumentation on this track. Is just so there's just so much reverb on it that it kind of makes it sound kind of inconspicuous and kind of bland. But, pretty much beyond, right after a somewhat inconsistent first leg of the album, pretty much all the other tracks that follow are great. The song Margaritas at the Mall is definitely one of my favorite tracks on this record. It's probably my favorite out of the teaser tracks for the album. And on this song, he's sort of, this is the kind of song that may come off as initially him literally drinking margaritas at the mall, probably with an old friend who share similar self-destructive kind of traits as he does. But as you keep listening, you sort of find that it's kind of a metaphor for how people with mental health problems, with depression, with schizophrenia, all this, are essentially all find themselves kind of drinking their own figurative margaritas and it could be like, people sort of feeling kind of lonely and very isolated, like in a huge public space, like a mall, like space. So like a mall, and also this is one of my favorite instrumentals on the album. Love those. So love the funeral horns, the the wailing pedal steel, the very colorful psychedelic organs. It's the organs. It's a perfect example of this album not only being lyrically heartbreaking, but also musically. Like, when those trumpets hit, you can hear your eyes you can feel those eyes mist up a little. So the next track on here, She's Making Friends, I'm Turning Stranger, great title, by the way, sort of goes back into the relationship concept of sort of feeling like kind of the awkward person that's not really there in a relationship, and sort of saying that his significant other is she can't make it to her car without making a new friend. She's a small town superstar. Everybody hollering her name. That's poeticism right there, man. And he's sort of finding himself turning more into a stranger to her, and sort of seeing all these normal men that are just yearning to obtain her, and sort of saying he's a loser, she's a gainer, and that's one thing of which they're dang sure. And there are some really great solos on here. Love the bluegrass-inspired guitar solo and the, and also that pedal steel solo is really cool too. Really sort of showing that even though, David Berman is definitely, in his most down and most dampered emotional state, he's still, him and his bandmates are still allowing themselves to at least have a little fun with his sadness and sort of make the most out of their little jam session. The next track, I Loved Being My Mother's Son, is kind of a song where he's reflecting on someone that probably the only person that he feels really any sympathy that he really feels any sympathy or empathy for. Um, in fact, I will say that this track is probably the only sort of glare of happiness this album really provides, as he's sort of talking about what his mother did for him that was really special to him and whatnot. Not It's a little on the nose, you know. We've all kind of heard people sort of praise their mothers before, but the but in the context of like his mother being gone for a long time and now his son being gone, you know, it kind of makes it that much more morbid and much more emotionally like draining to listen to. I mean, genuinely, this song makes me cry. I will say that. Like, even the strongest person in the world will, can't even try to suppress the emotion that songs like this and really every song on this album could elicit for him. The but probably my favorite track on here, as it is probably very chillingly comparable to his death, is the song "Nights That Won't Happen," because a lot of nights, like, you know, since August of last year, a lot of nights have not happened for David Berman. And also saying some really kind of heartbreaking lines about that are just so true about what happens when people die. The dead know what they're doing when they leave this world behind. When the dying's all done and the suffering subsides, all the suffering gets done by the ones we leave behind. Isn't it kind of crazy to know that the living, like the ones who are still going to be here, are going to be the ones that suffer more than the people who die? I mean, you know, just this is some pretty complicated stuff here, but it does result in probably one of my favorite songs of 2019. I think the song is beautiful. The harmonies are fantastic. I love the wallowing mellotrons, the twinkling vibraphones, the very kind of atmospheric guitars and drums. This is unlike on Snow Is Falling. This is one track where the reverb actually works and kind of adds something to the song. Something to the song. But probably the most fun and catchiest song on the record would have to be the song Storyline Fever, besides it being probably the most hilarious moment on the entire record. I mean, this song seems to be the most underrated track on the album, and I don't see why. It's one of my favorite tracks on the record. I think it definitely is really cool to see David Berman, you know, make the most out of, you know, his last musical recording ever by, like, you know, him and his bandmates just jamming the hell out on this track, as well as him as well as him just sounding so snarky with lines like, "You took her own love for the marketplace in the wanton corner of a western state, whether every shopper is a basket case, just realizing the horizon forms a frowning face, hanging around those haunts at night, where half the clientele was part poltergeist, grinding an axe against all that exists, minus their protected exceptions to it," basically sort of creating this very wry sort of rumination on mental health and how it can kind of distort your reality a little bit and make horse shit seem true to you. And I will say that that sort of jangly lead riff I think is awesome, and so is that kind of psychedelic solo at the end of the track. But then the album closes with a song that couldn't have been a more satisfying or accurate finale for David Berman. Maybe I'm the only one for me. and he's sort of finding himself, kind of accepting how he feels and how he's not going to be around for very long, while still coming out with some pretty hilarious lines, like the line about if no one's fond of fucking me, maybe no one's fucking fond of me. Yeah, maybe I'm the only one for me. Like, like that's definitely pretty hilarious and pretty blunt, sort of direct thing he says that yet kind of makes me chuckle a little. Even if it makes me sad that this is coming from the last song he probably ever written. He's probably ever written. So yeah, this is definitely a great album. If there are any other shortcomings about this record, it's that if you've known Silver Jews for a long time, this is probably going to be pretty predictable. I've only heard a little bit of Silver Jews. Still need to do a better deep dive into their catalog, but I definitely see how probably one of the only things musically that's really evolved is it's definitely twangier and more country tinged than a lot of Silver Jews music. Silver Jews music, and also this is a pretty emotionally draining listen. This is definitely the kind of thing that I can't just listen to it on any day. I kind of have to, be in the mood for it because especially in the context of him, of his death, it definitely is a pretty harrowing, very tragic listen. But still, when a tragic listen is this good, it definitely is one I will revisit time and time again. So going with a light 8 out of 10 for this new self-titled Purple Mountains record. And I'll see you for episode 261.